Hi, welcome to this YouTube channel. Concept first to mastery. It's going to be all about web development, mobile apps development, working with AI and integrating AI into web development and mobile app development. Also, I'll be sharing some career growth tips and other stuffs as we go along. Without much ado, in this particular module, I want to introduce us into web development and how the web works, web development and how the web works. So what I'm going to do is that immediately after, okay, while doing this, let me just show you that at the end of this module one, um, so at the end of module one, we are going to walk through, this is going to be the first task, right? Where you design this screen or where you work on this screen, writing the HTML correctly, right? And all that. So understand the HTML elements, being able to translate what the design into HTML code and have it displayed like this. So that's our first task in the module one, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start immediately without wasting time. So I will start with web intro, like I've said, and how the web works. So just before I go into that, so this will be useful for those who are just starting their career journey and into web development, right? And you don't know what system specification is okay for programming. So I will just quickly give you something that I will call my own personal recommendation, right, based on the experience I've had over the years. So you want to ensure that the device you are buying have good battery, right, for sufficient power. So you want to be sure that the battery is good, right? And also you want to be sure that the system actually have features that can handle demands of coding, right? Compiling and testing applications. So this is the mind with which you purchase whatever system that you are trying to buy, right? In that regard, or you can actually check the one you have whether it meets that requirement. So the first is the processor. So personally, I would recommend Core i5. I've seen Core i3 struggle with VS Code, and VS Code is basic, right? It's a text editor that most programmers use. There are other text editors, but that's just the most popular. So you want to use that and you're using Core i3, it's going to be hanging. So Intel Core i5, I would say should be is my recommendation on that, right? Then memory, that's the random access memory. I'll say minimum of 8 gig, right? 4 gig to will struggle with most of the programming applications that we have, right? So minimum of 8 gig. If you already know that you're going to be running tasks that involve virtual machines, large scale applications, right? Or data intensive programming, um, you want to work on AI, but and other stuffs, right? That will involve large data computations and all that. You want to just go for something like 16 gig, right? Just straight away. So, but if your budget is not there, you can just stick with 8 gig. Storage, minimum of 256 gigabyte, right? And SSD, right? I will not advise you use HDD, right? SSD is faster these days, although new systems now comes with SSD, right? You want to confirm that it's actually SSD. My recommended storage size is 512, right? Or larger. So of course, all these will ensure that you have better performance and that you can also accommodate larger files and work with many projects on your system, right? In terms of graphics, if you're not intending to do game development or work with machine learning or things that will require high definition graphics, right? You can just go with the integrated graphics. So that is sufficient for most programming tasks. Make sure you check out for this, especially if you just want to buy the system, right? The display 13-inch minimum, right? Anything smaller than that might not give you a good view of what you are working on, right? Full HD, 13-inch, that's the minimum. But if you want to have a good view, right, of what you are working with, I would say 15-inch or even larger display screens are better, right? In terms of operating system, yeah, minimum of Windows 10. So because we have some programming applications, right, that will not work with Windows 8. I remember when I started out and I want to start using Docker, right? I was using Windows 8 then. I struggle with it. So Windows 10, Mac OS 10.15, that is the minimum. Of course, you can go above that. So that's my recommendation for system specification, right? So the next thing I want to quickly talk about is setting development environment. So when you want to start programming, right, you need to have the environment set up where you will write the code, right? Uh, the two common things that you have to have in place, right? That is your client now, the browser, and then the code editor. So like I've mentioned, just like we have different type of browsers, right? We also have different type of code editors. So we have Visual Studio Code, which is the most popular, with larger community support, many plugins, external plugins that can make our life easy when we are coding and doing all those things, right? Then we also have Sublime Text, very, very useful too and beginner friendly. We have Atom and all other type of text editor, but I will be using Visual Studio Code, right? Okay. What I would just say is if you want to, let's say you want to download it, because that's another place beginners struggle, right? I just want to do this so that those who are coming on board for the first time can find this useful. So you can just go to Visual Studio Code, right? Visual Studio Code is you are going to see this first. You are going to see this, which is the official website. So once you go there, you'll be able to download a version that is appropriate, right, for your device. If you are using Mac, right, you are using this. If you are using Windows 10 upward. So you see that this does not even support Windows 8, right? That's why I said in my recommendation Windows 10 minimum, right? So you will just click on this and you will install it, right? I have the is an executable file ending with .exe. So I have it already and I will not be downloading it all over again, but you just click on this, right? And it's going to start the download for you. So you can see here, click on download and so we should see the download starts. Okay. All right. So once you click on the download here, right, the download will start. And I don't want to download it all over again. So you can see that I have it downloaded here, right? So it's an executable file, like I said. You just need to click on it. And once you click on it, so you'll see this prompt and you just follow it, accept the agreement and click on next, right? Just follow the default. This is the part where it's going to install it. And that's what, if you don't want that, you can change it, but you can always, in order not to run into issues, just leave the default part, right? Next. Then all these two, you can just say next. So if you want to create an icon on your desktop, you can also do that here. But for me, I'll just say next, right? I have this installed already. I have to uninstall it just so that I can walk you through this process. So here we can now say install. So it's going to now complete the setup and install the application for you so that you can start using it. And the moment it's done installing, it's going to open automatically, right? So in case that probably it does not open automatically for you, you can come to the search menu and type for VS Code there, right? And you're going to see it come up here if it's already installed. So this is almost done. Yeah, so that's it. So you can say launch with Visual Studio Code. If you don't want it to be launched, you cannot comment it, but I want it launched. So it's going to open it right away. So, and that is your text editor, right? So another part is, of course, you need to familiarize yourself with working with text editor. I won't be focusing on that now. When we start using the text editor myself, probably to walk you through HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all that, I'm going to chip in on some things, right? That has to do with working with VS Code. But this is the interface. This is what it's going to look like once you have installed it. So that's it on to that end. Now that we have assistant specification, we have this environment setup, we have browser, whether Chrome or Firefox, then we have a text editor. In our own case, we have the Visual Studio Code. If you want to download the Sublime Text, you can also do that. To just type Sublime Text 4, and you will see the official website, and you'll be able to download and install it. So having said that, the next thing we want to do is we want to start talking about web development. Don't forget that this is about introduction to web development, right? So the first thing is, what is web development all about, right? And I will just break it down. It's a process. It's a process. And I want us to also get used to this, because the whole aim of this channel is that we provide enough concepts, right, and understanding on some programming concepts, right, before delving into building projects. That way you have a solid background, and midway into your programming career, you will not struggle, right? You'll be able to do a lot of things and even jump from one programming language to the other, just because you have a solid foundation, right? It's really going to be hands-on, but you are going to see me do some explanations, right, so that you can grasp some concept before we do the building. So web development is a process of designing. So it starts with a designer, and that's why you hear UI UX designers and all that. So it starts with designing what features should be on the application, the flow, the pages, the choice of color, the choice of text, right? Even simulating how you move from one page to the other and all that. So it starts with the process of designing. Then once the designer is done, then the front-end developer jumps in and then convert that design. That's the building now, right? Convert that design into the actual code, right? So building, then testing, and maintaining a website. So web development, again, is a process of designing, building, testing, right, and then maintaining a website, which ranges from simple single page application to complex full stack applications, right? So we just take the baby steps, and then we'll grow from there. So when you talk about web development, usually you have the front end and you also have the back end side of things. So I will talk more about the front end and back end side of things as we move on, right? So there is something that you can't but talk about when it comes to web development. There is something that is the communication protocol, right? So if it is not there, there is no communication between a client, right, and the server. So usually the client is the front end, and the server represents the back end side of things. So usually you don't see the server, but there is a server sitting on a particular port and listening for requests from the client. So the server attends to each request from the client and sends back a response. So what makes that possible is the communication protocol, right, which is the HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The secure version of it is the HTTPS, where the S stands for secure, right? So it's a communication protocol that allows transmitting data between a client and the server. So the way the web is designed to work, whether it's mobile apps, or they tend to communicate with a server, right? So through requests. So the client make requests to the server then responds back with an appropriate answer. And if that cannot be found, then it must respond back with something, right? So we'll get into that detail eventually. So it is designed for communication between web browser, right, and web servers. So how the web works. So like I've said already, the client make requests. That's the first thing. So usually you type, just say, that's what we call the browser, the client. So if I want to go to Facebook, I'll need to type Facebook here, facebook.com. This is the address, right? So this is the address. This request will be forwarded to the DNS, domain name system, right? Which will actually kind of find this particular address, right? And that address will be somewhere, that's the server, right? Seated and listening for requests. And since that server is listening for that, once that, if that server do exist, right? If that address do exist, it's going to be forwarded there. That address is going to receive the incoming request and treat it accordingly and respond back with an appropriate message. So that's where from the request, the client made the request, then we have the DNS resolution, right, where the browser sends the HTTP request to the DNS server to find the IP address of the website server. So the server then receives the request, process it, and send back data. So the server usually is not just in isolation. The server will can communicate with other servers. The server can also make requests to the backend, right, or to the database to get some data, right, and then send back to the client. Then we have HTML rendering, depending on what system you are using, what architecture you are using, whether it's you are working with a single page application, right, or server-side rendering application. So HTML can be sent from the server, right? And if you are working with single page application, usually you will send back a JSON data, right, which the front end will receive and then display, right, for on the browser for users to see. So the last part of it is once the response comes back, the browser then displays the web page, right, for users to interact with. So that's just a brief breakdown of how the web works. So this kind of gives us also a pictorial explanation of what I've just explained. You can see the front end, that's your browser, and that's the client, right? It makes requests to the backend. The backend involves the web server and the database. The server is always listening on a port, right? So once he receives request, he handles that request. If he needs to pull out something from the database, he pulls it out, then he responds back to the client, then the client then display the data, right? So if you have this understanding, then you are good to go. Yeah, that might not be all, but that is what you need to know as a beginner, right? Eventually, whatever other deeper mechanisms that we have, right, underneath, you will tap into it and you have a proper understanding. But it's just good that you have this understanding getting started, right? So if you like this channel, if you want to see more and more of this content, right, you can subscribe and also turn on your notification. Thank you. See you in the next module.